Welcome to AP Biology 2.5, Membrane Permeability. I'm Dr. Joseph. This is going to be a very short chapter, but it's a bridge between what we looked at in terms of the structure and function of plasma membrane and the coming chapters which are going to discuss about the transport of materials across the plasma membrane. So in this chapter, we are going to be looking at why selective permeability is an important characteristic of life and what makes a plasma membrane selectively permeable and which molecules are transported across plasma membranes. So, in a living system, a cell is living in an aqueous environment, a water-filled environment. So the inside of the cell also has water, and it's not just pure water. It has a whole bunch of proteins and amino acids floating free and salts and everything that it's a jelly-like material. That's the cytosol, and the outside is also a water-based form. So you need to maintain a certain internal environment so that it is conducive for life. You should have enough concentration of materials to do biochemical processes, and you should not have toxins inside. Toxins, if they somehow enter into your cell, they must be kicked out. So all of these things need to be very carefully orchestrated, and the only interface for the cell, the major interface for the cell here, is the plasma membrane. So the plasma membrane must be very careful, like a bouncer in a nightclub. The plasma membrane has to make sure who can enter and who should not enter, and who needs to be moved out, and that becomes really important for maintaining the homeostasis of life. Homeostasis is the ability to maintain internal stable conditions. So the movement of materials from one side to the other side across a membrane is called as permeability. And a plasma membrane, because it's allowing only a few things to pass through and not others to pass through, is called as selectively permeable or semi-permeable. And that basically ensures that whatever is happening on the outside, the inside has a certain sense of stability. So the materials from the outside can travel inside either by simply diffusing across the membrane, by wriggling their way between the different molecules of the plasma membrane, or using the proteins that are present as channels, as tubes, or as carriers, with or without the use of energy, to move them from one side to the other side. And all of this restriction of what is allowed and what is not allowed, comes down to two things. What is the size of the material that is being transported, and what is the charge of the material that is being transported? Now, again, the charge factor becomes critical in the design of our plasma membrane. So just to recap, our cell plasma membranes, the major fabric there is the phospholipids. Phospholipids, as we saw, are amphipathic molecules, meaning they have both hydrophilic and hydrophobic parts. And so the hydrophilic head interacts with water, and the hydrophobic tail is buried in the form of a bilayer between, a sandwich between two layers of hydrophilic heads. So you can see here, there's one layer, and that's monolayer, and there's another monolayer of plasma membranes. So all of this space is just hydrophobic tails. Hydrophobic, non-polar, means it cannot work with other charged particles, right? If it's a hydrophobic molecule, it means it does not have charge, which means it cannot interact with other charged particles. It cannot work with ions. It cannot work with polar molecules, because polar molecules like water also have a little bit of charge on them. So here you have a picture of a molecule, of a phospholipid molecule, and this side interacting with water, and this side moving away from water in an oil material. This is their happiest state. Based on that characteristic, and also remember that these molecules are bound to each other by weak hydrophobic forces. So it is fluid, yes, but there is some kind of an attraction between them. So they are not just going to, if some big molecule comes here, they are not just going to suddenly open up and give way for another molecule to pass through. They are going to resist that because they have a collection of weak hydrophobic charges that are connecting them. So that's why they are not going to allow large particles to pass through. So given that size and charge restrictions, you can see that very small hydrophobic molecules have the best chance of passing through. Oxygen molecule, O2 for example, right? O2 is a hydrophobic, is a nonpolar molecule. So it's going to, and it's very, very small, so it's going to pass through. Carbon dioxide will pass through, nitrogen will pass through. So gases can diffuse, and this process of simply moving through the plasma membrane is called as diffusion. Okay, so diffusion can happen very easily for small hydrophobic molecules. And some molecules, small molecules that have some level of charge, like water. Okay, water is a polar molecule, right? If you remember from our very first lessons, water has oxygen that has slight negative charge, and the two hydrogen atoms of the water have slight positive charge. So it's a polar molecule. But even though it is a polar molecule and it should not technically interact with this hydrophobic stage, because it is so small, it is able to kind of squeeze its way through. It's not very efficient, but it squeezes its way through, wriggles its way through the membrane. And when water moves through a membrane, diffuses across a membrane, it is called as osmosis. Okay. What cannot go through a membrane are large molecules that are, especially the large molecules that are polar. Okay, so if it is a somewhat smaller molecule like a lipid molecule which is non-polar, so non-polar has the best chance of traversing through this space. But if it's a somewhat small molecule like a steroid, some steroids can pass through. But when you have a large lipid molecule like a triglyceride, it is not able to pass through. Okay, because the size is a limitation there. But if your molecule is large and it has some kind of a charge built into it, if it's let's say it has got a polar charge on it, those molecules are not able to pass through. Okay, so they are going to need some kind of a help going from one side of the membrane to the other side of the membrane, and they usually recruit proteins for doing that transportation job. We will study about that in the next few chapters. And a definite no-no is ions, because ions have charge, right? Positive charge, negative charge. Sodium ions, potassium ions, chloride ions. These are all really important for functions of cells, especially when you're looking at neuronal signaling or intramuscular junction. So you need these ions to move in and out of cells, but by themselves they cannot diffuse across membranes like oxygen can or carbon dioxide can. They cannot do that. They are going to be immediately stopped by the hydrophobic nature of these tails of the plasma of the phospholipids. So that's what you need to remember from this chapter. What are the things that are able to pass through a plasma membrane? What are the things that cannot pass through? Gases, small molecules, not polar, they can pass through. Hydrophobic molecules, benzene, even steroids, they can pass through. Okay, polar molecules can wriggle through. It's not efficient, but they can wriggle through. Large polar molecules definitely cannot go through, and charged molecules, ions, they cannot pass through at all. So just remember this, and that'll help you remember. That'll help you determine which is going to go through and which is not going to go through. So we spoke of water. We spoke of osmosis as the diffusion of water from one side to the other side. Just wanted to add a little bit more information to this. There are some cells, like kidney cells, or root cells that require a lot of water to move from inside to the outside. I'm sorry, from outside to the inside. And that requires so for that, in that situation, diffusion, simple diffusion of water molecules is not going to be enough, right? So that is when you need a special tube or a channel to move things from one side to the other side, and that particular protein channel that helps transport of water is called aquaporin. Aqua is water, porin means hole. So it is an integral membrane protein which spans the entire stretch of the plasma membrane, the breadth of the plasma membrane, and the outside of this membrane, yeah, you can see is hydrophobic, so it can work very nicely with the tails of the fatty acids. So the fatty acid tails of the plasma of the phospholipids, but the inside has a special has charge, so it has the ability to transport water molecules from its hydrophilic is inside is hydrophilic, so water molecules can go from one side to the other side, and it can transport a lot more water molecules compared to the simple diffusion process. Okay, so that's just something to remember. By the way, just as a quick side note, aquaporin was discovered by Dr. Peter Agar, I think, and in 2003 he won a joint Nobel Prize in chemistry for the discovery of aquaporins. So anyway, that's a cool side note. Anyway, like I said, this is a very small chapter and it kind of acts as a bridge between what we know of plasma membranes and what we're going to study in terms of transport across plasma membranes. So hopefully you are able to differentiate what is going to go through and what is not going to go through across the selective membrane that the plasma membrane is. Thank you.